Please introduce yourself and let the audience know about you. Include how art became your passion.
My name is Kate Hufnagel. I have been an artist for most of my life. I started becoming interested in art when I was even younger than you because my mother was an artist and my father was an architect. So I grew up in an environment where I was around people who made art all the time and where I had access to all the art supplies in the world and lots of time to work on it. But maybe more importantly, I have 5 brothers and sisters, and some of them were smarter than I am, and some of them were more athletic than I am, and some of them were funnier than I am. But the one thing I was interested in learning how to draw. And since my mother was an artist, becoming involved in art and learning to draw and paint was a way in which I could have special time with my mom and that whole mob of kids. And that made it very special to me. And even all through her life, my mother and I stayed close because we would go to museums together, we would go to art classes together, and it became a very special way that we loved one another. What's your next question?
We know that you learned art from your mom, then educated yourself. Talk to us about that. What roadblocks did you run into and how did you overcome them?
Well, I did a lot of reading and I had a lot of art books around so I could look and study those. We didn't have a very good art program in my elementary school, but I was around lots of artists. We occasionally would have maybe something that was offered in the community, but it's not like today where there are lots and lots of classes that kids can go to, or they could go online. Boy, do I wish I could have gone online at that age, all the things I could have learned. But what I did have was stacks and stacks of papers and pencils, and my mother would show me some basic ways to approach art. Then she always said, make it your own. Otherwise, you're just learning to copy. But at some point, you can't just draw a picture of a cartoon you copied. You have to make up your own cartoon, make up your own story and illustrate that. So she always encouraged me to see myself more clearly through art. But there were some roadblocks because I met lots and lots of artists. But most of them were adult artists and they had been doing art for a long, long time. And they really knew how to do it well. They knew how to draw and how to paint and how to make sculptures. So the biggest roadblock I ran into in life as an artist was thinking, I'm just not as good as everyone else. And that was a real problem because when you're surrounded by people who are the best of the best of the best, it's hard to remember that they're also really old and they've been practicing for a long time and you're just a kid and you just started. But my mom said something to me that really made a big difference. She said, no matter where you start, you need to start. And if every day you work at something for just 15 minutes or a half hour, you're going to get better and better. And in a couple of weeks, you will see the difference. When I was a teacher, I did this with my students, where I would challenge them over the summer to just spend 15 minutes a day trying to draw something that was real. And you know what? A lot of those kids jumped 2 and 3 grade levels over the 8 or 9 weeks of the summer vacation because they did that. And they just did it 15 minutes a day. That's all it took. And now I think you can learn just about anything in 15 minutes a day if you just stick to it.
We understand you went to school and received degrees, but they weren't for art. Walk us through that decision.
Okay. Well, I started out in college in 1968 and I graduated in 1972. And something very important was happening in America at that point in time. Does anybody know what it was? It's ancient history to you guys. What do you think it was? Anybody else? If you're not sure, yes.
Maybe the Great Depression?
Oh, well, a little later than that. The Great Depression was in the 1929 to 1940. There was a war. You ever hear of the Vietnam War?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Vietnam War got a lot of us, people of my generation, very upset because it made no sense to us as to why we were fighting that war. And in that war, if you were a young man, this didn't apply to women, but if you were a young man, you could be drafted. The government would give you a number based on your birthday, and they would draw that number, and when they did that, you had to go and be a soldier, whether you wanted to or not. It's not that way right now. But that was how they built an army. But a lot of young men didn't want to go. So a lot of young women didn't want their young men and boyfriends to leave either. So we started to protest because we didn't think the war was right or fair. And at that point, I was a art student, and I went to my drawing class, and the teacher never showed up. But on the board was a sentence that he'd written, which said, "The true artist must reflect their own milieu." That means their own place and time and culture. And under that he wrote, "Go to the protest on Old Main Lawn today and come back with new ideas." Well, first I was a little mad because I had walked 2 miles to get to that class, and I really wanted to draw that day. But I went down to the protest where there were hundreds, probably 2,000 people on this big lawn listening to speakers. And what I realized was it wasn't a lot of artists sitting around recording this. The people who were being listened to were the people at the microphone. And I realized that the spoken word was every bit as important a kind of art as drawing pictures was. So I started to take courses in public speaking, and that is how I got my degrees in public speaking and communication. And I had one real good thing that happened to me when I took those classes, and that was I had a wonderful teacher. Have you ever had a teacher you really loved? I think you guys have a really great teacher, by the way. And the teachers that you know that are important to you, you will remember their names through time. This teacher's name was Lydia Foreman, and I took a class in the improvement of voice and diction. Who knows what diction is? No one, okay. So when I was a girl, I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania. We learned to talk fast. We learned to talk with kind of a twang, kind of an accent. And you try to talk over everybody over the time, especially if you have 5 brothers and sisters, because you're trying real hard to get that audience. What Miss Foreman taught me was to lower my pitch, to slow down my voice, to make eye contact with everybody in the room so that everyone was watching every minute, because you never knew who was going to look at you next, who the next target in that audience was going to be. She taught me how to listen slowly, and she taught me how to ask good questions. So I got my degree in speech communication, and then I went on to get another degree in rhetorical analysis and criticism. Bet you never heard of that before, did you? Basically, I got a degree in persuasion, how to talk people into accepting new ideas, which has been very useful in the world of grown-ups, because I can convince people to do things, or at least consider things they might not otherwise do. So I can look at somebody who's shyly in the back of the room and say, "You're over there by yourself, but I want to see you. Stand up." Did it work? Okay, it's kind of like magic in a way when you do it well. I didn't mean to embarrass you, just to demonstrate. And now what I find is that rhetoric, that is making a convincing message, is an art. It's one of the classic arts from way back in the days of the ancient Greeks. And I can use the pictures that I make as a way to convey my messages, but I can also use my language to do that. And one of the areas that I specialized in was small group communications. So how to deal with crowds of about this size and help people to learn how to work together. So then my challenge became, how do I couple that with doing the visual art that I love? Well, I am the president of York Art Association, and that's a very old arts organization that's been around for 111 years, and it's run by volunteers So it takes a lot of active coordination and lots of people working in small groups. So with my background as a public speaker and a small group communicator and organizer, I can help these people to work together with one another to do what the organization does. We primarily provide classes, so we have kids classes all year round, but some great ones in the summer. And we have exhibitions. And one of the things I'm very proud of is I convinced the gallery committee to stage the York County Youth Art Exhibition so the kids in grades K through 12 would have a chance to show their art in a real formal art studio. We also go out and do public outreach and do classes to schools and to the community. And one of the ways that I did that was I wanted us to be able to recruit more members. And it seemed to me when we would go out and we would have our tent and we would set up shows for the public, that people would walk in and they'd say, oh yes, my, nice art. And they'd turn around and they'd walk out. Well, that didn't give us much time to talk to people and tell them about all the wonderful things that we did. So I invented this project that's called Artist Trading Cards. And you can see that these are about the size of a baseball card, and they were in fact inspired by hockey cards in the late 1990s, and these are made and traded around the world, and I've been doing them for over 10 years. So what I started to do was to make hundreds of these cards, and when people now come to our tent or come to our organization, then I can say, I lay out lots of these cards, and they're very intrigued because there are hundreds of them. And they get to look at them and I'll say, would you like one of those? And usually they'll say something like, well, I really like this one. How much does it cost? And then I'll say, you can't buy them because they're a trading card. But there's a table over there and you can go over and sit down with all the supplies I've provided and make a card for me and we'll swap. One of yours comes into my collection, you take one of mine home. That meant the people were staying around for 30 minutes rather than 3 minutes. And then I could tell them about my organization and about our classes and our exhibitions. And we went from having about, maybe 30 new members a year to over 100 in the first year that we did this. So it was very successful. And it also got a lot of good press because I'm very good at giving interviews. I like talking to people. I like talking on camera. I'm not afraid of talking to people. So that meant we got a lot of newspaper stories and we even got on the television. And we were able to work with other organizations. So we work with the Heritage Trust to help work on projects that teach kids about history through art. And we worked with the Strand Capitol so that when kids come in, they can spend a whole day learning to dance or learning to drum. And while one group is doing that, another group is making art cards with me. And we do it at York Fest every year where I'll swap hundreds of cards. So in the last 2 years, I have made and traded over 1,000 artist trading cards. And each one of them is unique. So there are no two alike. Which means I'm now the most widely collected artist in York County. And today, I brought artist trading cards to make and swap with you. And I brought, maybe about 500 or so. I have about 600 made right now. But you're going to have a chance to look at those, and each of you pick a card, and then by the end of the school year, you're going to make a card for me. And Miss Amy will get it back to me. How do I manage all these things? I keep a calendar. I keep 2 calendars. I keep one in my cell phone and one on my computer. Every night before I go to bed, I look to see what I have to do the next day so I know how early I have to get up and how to dress. Sometimes you have to dress fancy and sometimes you have to dress comfortably. But then I am able to plan through my week when I have time to make cards, when I have time to paint, when I have meetings to go to, when I have to make a presentation, or today when I have to write a grant proposal. And I try to figure that out and look at the week in advance so that I always know when I'm going to have time to do that. And then how I manage my time at home is every spare moment that I have, I am making these little cards. When I go out to a restaurant, I take my pen and cards with me, and I'll make them there on the spot. And if I have to wait for somebody, I usually have the materials in the card to start getting some cards made. And then slowly these accumulate over time, and ultimately I have enough to trade with everyone. And when I'm at home, I make better use of my time because I like to make art and listen to books at the same time. And sometimes the books that I listen to make a difference on the art that I'm making. So I like to listen to books about history, and also like to listen to books about science and mathematics. And so I try to bring some of that into my cards sometime. But how do I manage it all? It's because I'm retired and I don't have a job and I don't have kids to raise. And this is a good thing for me, because if I didn't have art, I wouldn't see people. I wouldn't talk to people. I wouldn't have anything to do to fill my time. And this way I meet hundreds of people all year round, and I get to share with them my passion. And I get to take the two things, the two arts that I'm good at, rhetoric and the visual arts, and roll them together in a way that makes the whole community better.
What ways do you like to get art into the community? Explain how you do it and why you do it.
Well, I will do things with the artist trading cards, like set up swap meets where people come in and make and trade cards. I will teach classes on that. I will go to local libraries and do the cards there. I have a couple libraries where I do coloring book sessions for grown-ups to teach them just to chill out, relax, and get some color in their life again. And they seem to like that a lot. I teach some classes. I teach a homeschool group. And I also paint and I exhibit. So the painting I showed you early is one that I have exhibited. And then I do a lot of other watercolors that I get out there to present to the world. And I'm very fortunate with this background that if you give me an audience and a subject and a few minutes to think about it, I'll keep everybody entertained and leave them smiling.